Welcome back to World History Explored. Christmas usually brings a peaceful time to think back on the year that's nearly gone. In 1989, there was a lot to think about in Romania. The Berlin Wall, a huge symbol of tyranny, came crashing down dramatically. Ronald Reagan famously called the Soviet Union the evil empire, and now it was breaking apart. Countries like Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Bulgaria threw out their communist leaders. Even the Soviet republics were restless, looking to break free from Russian control. Lithuania was gearing up to declare independence just a few months later. Even in Romania, the ruthless rule of Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu was over. After 24 years in power, they finally faced justice, although it wasn't perfect. On December 25, 1989, Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceaușescu and his wife Elena were swiftly executed by a firing squad outside a military building. Just moments before, they had been condemned, and an execution squad comprising 8 paratroopers carried out the sentence. Elena Ceaușescu screamed at the soldiers, while Nicolae Ceaușescu defiantly began to sing before they were shot. The executions were so rapid that cameras struggled to capture the brutal final moments. The Ceaușescus had argued that the condemning court lacked legal standing, but their protests did not delay their execution. What were their crimes, and why were they sentenced to death? Who was Nicolae Ceaușescu? How did he rise from humble beginnings in rural Romania to the very top of the country's post-war communist regime? Nicolae Ceaușescu was born on February 5, 1918, in Scornășești, Olt County. He hailed from a humble peasant family, being the third of 9 children. His father owned a small plot of land and a few sheep, and Nicolae helped support his family by working as a tailor. He attended the local school until age 11, when he moved to Bucharest. In Bucharest, he apprenticed as a shoemaker under Alexandru Sandulescu, who was involved in the Communist Party. Ceaușescu joined the party in 1932, but as a teenager, he started with minor tasks. His activism led to multiple arrests during the 1930s in various cities like Bucharest, Craiova, Câmpulung, and Râmnicu Vâlcea, primarily for his communist activities. By 1936, he was convicted of being a dangerous communist agitator and distributing propaganda, resulting in a 2-year prison sentence, extended by contempt of court and forced residence in Scornășești. Most of his time was served in Doftana prison. Released briefly in 1939, he met Elena Petrescu, whom he married in 1946 and who would later become integral to his political career. During World War II, Ceaușescu was repeatedly arrested for conspiracy against social order and spent time in various prisons and internment camps. In 1943, Nicolae Ceaușescu was transferred to the Târgu Jiu internment camp, where he shared a cell with Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej, who became his mentor. At Târgu Jiu, the camp authorities allowed communist prisoners significant autonomy within their cell block, as long as they didn't attempt to escape, often swayed by bribes. Gheorghiu Dej conducted self-criticism sessions, where party members confessed their misunderstandings of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin's teachings as interpreted by Gheorghiu Dej. Ceaușescu reportedly enforced these sessions, sometimes resorting to physical force against reluctant or dissenting members, according to journalist Edward Baer. These sessions solidified Gheorghiu Dej's leadership and strengthened Ceaușescu's bond with him. Ceaușescu's time at Târgu Jiu marked the beginning of his ascent to power. After World War II, as Romania fell under Soviet influence, he served as secretary of the Union of Communist Youth from 1944 to 1945. After the Communists took control of Romania in 1947, Nicolae Ceaușescu rose swiftly through the ranks under the wing of Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej. He was elected to the Great National Assembly, Romania's new legislative body. In May 1948, Ceaușescu became Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, and by March 1949, he was promoted to Deputy Minister. Despite lacking military experience, he was appointed Deputy Minister overseeing the armed forces, eventually rising to the rank of Lieutenant General. He also served as first deputy to the Ministry of Defense and headed the Army's Higher Political Directorate. Ceausescu furthered his education at the Soviet Frunze Military Academy in Moscow in 1951 and 1952. In 1952, Gheorghiu Dej brought Ceausescu onto the Central Committee right after kicking out Anna Pacher's Muscovite faction. Back in the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Romanian Communist Party had two camps: the Home Communists, led by Gheorghiu Dej, who stayed put in Romania pre-1944, and the Muscovites, who chilled in the Soviet Union. Except for Poland's hiccup in '56 with Władysław Gomulka, Romania was the only Eastern European country where the Home Communists came out on top against the Muscovites. The rest of the Soviet bloc? They were busy purging their Home Communist crew, either tossing them in jail or worse. Ceausescu, a loyal Home Communist like his buddy Gheorghiu Dej, rode the wave of the Muscovites' downfall in '52 and snagged a sweet spot on the Politburo by '54, scoring major power points. During the collectivization gig, Ceausescu was a big shot in the ministries of agriculture and defense. According to the Romanian Workers' Party, between '49 and '52, they slapped cuffs on over 80,000 pesky peasants, with 30,000 ending up behind bars. Take Varu Rosca, for example. When locals rebelled against losing their land, Ceausescu led the crackdown, resulting in 18 of them getting locked up for rebellion and messing with the social order. In 1965, Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej's death created a power vacuum within the Communist Party of Romania. After a period of internal strife, Nicolae Ceaușescu emerged as a compromise candidate and was appointed General Secretary on March 22, 1965. Immediately upon taking power, Ceausescu launched a ruthless campaign to consolidate his control. He redefined Romania as a socialist republic, concentrating power by assuming the presidency of the State Council, effectively making himself the head of state. His political opponents were swiftly arrested and imprisoned. Ceausescu's confrontational stance towards the Soviet Union made him more acceptable to NATO countries. In the late 1960s, he ended press censorship and officially withdrew Romania from the Warsaw Pact. He publicly denounced the Soviet-led invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, visiting Prague to express solidarity with Alexander Dubček, the Czechoslovakian leader, and condemning the invasion as a threat to European peace and socialism worldwide. Despite these progressive foreign policies, Ceausescu enforced conservative social measures domestically. He banned abortion and contraception, subjecting women who had miscarriages to police scrutiny under suspicion of abortion. Those without children faced intrusive inquiries into their personal lives. In 1966, Ceausescu introduced Decree 770, which rewarded mothers with more than 5 children and mandated monthly gynecological monitoring, effectively prohibiting contraceptives and tightly regulating pregnancies. These policies led to a significant population increase in Romania, but also contributed tragically to a surge in orphan children placed in overcrowded institutions, highlighting widespread parental abandonment and the harsh consequences for children within this system. During the 1970s, Nicolae Ceaușescu continued to pursue a policy of openness towards NATO and the West, positioning Romania uniquely within the Warsaw Pact. Romania was one of the first to recognize West Germany and hosted U.S. President Richard Nixon, marking a significant diplomatic achievement. In 1971, Romania joined the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade and forged treaties with the European Economic Area, enhancing its global economic ties. Ceausescu undertook extensive international tours to bolster his image as a pragmatic communist leader independent of Soviet influence. He visited the US, UK, Spain, and Australia, aiming to establish Romania as a credible player on the world stage. Despite his international efforts, Ceausescu maintained a conventional communist economy at home, continuing Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej's policies of heavy industrialization with a focus on rural labor. This approach created a dual-class society where peasants were also industrial workers. Social conditions in Romania saw improvements during the late 1960s and early 1970s, with expanded educational opportunities, improved healthcare recognized by the World Health Organization, and enhanced social welfare provisions including pensions, education, and retirement care. Ceausescu's admiration for Asian communist leaders like Kim Il-sung and Mao Zedong influenced his domestic policies. He adopted aspects of their cults of personality and embraced self-reliance ideologies such as North Korea's Juke and Maoism. This led to the dissemination of ideological materials and the proclamation of the July Theses in 1971, which intensified state control over education, youth organizations, and cultural activities. The Theses centralized arts, education, literature, and leisure under strict party ideology, demanding ideological conformity throughout society. In 1974, Ceausescu's regime escalated efforts to merge state power with communist ideology, further tightening control over Romanian society. In the same year, Nicolae Ceaușescu solidified his authority by assuming the role of President of the Socialist Republic of Romania, consolidating executive power and ruling through decrees that carried the force of law. He was re-elected every 5 years until 1989, maintaining a firm grip on the country's political landscape. During the 1973-1974 oil embargo, Ceausescu capitalized on Romania's position as a major producer of oil refining equipment. He invested heavily in oil refining plants and used the profits to fund aid programs in the Third World, aiming to bolster Romania's global standing. However, these efforts were hampered by low productivity among Romanian workers and setbacks such as the devastating 1977 earthquake in Bucharest, which delayed construction and caused financial losses. The late 1970s brought challenges for Ceausescu's regime, including a major strike by 30,000 miners protesting poor working conditions and unpaid wages. Allegations surfaced that union leaders were subjected to harmful X-rays to induce cancer, underscoring the government's harsh response to dissent. Ceausescu maintained successful foreign relations, highlighted by his historic 1978 visit to the UK, where he signed a lucrative aerospace contract and was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, marking a first for a communist leader. Domestically, Ceausescu faced economic difficulties in the 1980s, exacerbated by a referendum in 1986 to repay all foreign debts, which constrained domestic spending and led to economic stagnation. Harsh rationing measures and declining living standards fueled discontent, culminating in a 1987 rebellion in Brajov by industrial workers against government policies, which was brutally suppressed. By November 1989, Ceausescu's authoritarian grip was slipping amid widespread anti-communist uprisings across Eastern Europe. His November re-election and denunciation of these revolutions only intensified protests in Romania. In mid-December 1989, demonstrations erupted nationwide following the state's attempt to evict ethnic Hungarian pastor Laszlo Tokes, sparking broader opposition to Ceausescu's regime. These events set the stage for the dramatic conclusion of Ceausescu's rule in December 1989, marking the end of his totalitarian regime and Romania's transition to democracy. On December 21, 1989, as protests swelled across Romania against Ceausescu's regime, the response from the police and armed forces was deadly, resulting in the deaths of numerous peaceful demonstrators, including men, women, and children. During this tumultuous period, Ceausescu was away on a state visit to Iran and returned on December 20th to find widespread opposition brewing. In a desperate bid to regain control, Ceausescu orchestrated a staged show of support in Bucharest on December 21st, hoping to portray it as a spontaneous pro-regime march. However, Romanian citizens, bypassing state propaganda, accessed Western media and independent news sources that reported on anti-Ceausescu movements erupting nationwide. The demonstration in Revolution Square on December 21st turned into a debacle for Ceausescu. His speech, typically filled with praise for the socialist revolution and communist rule, was met with jeers and insults from the crowd. Despite attempting to calm the situation and promise increased wages, the protesters drowned out his words with their chants. On December 22nd, the crisis escalated further, with the reported suicide of Ceausescu's defense minister, Vasile Milea, which many believed to be an assassination. This event led to a rift within the army, with soldiers joining the protests in cities across Romania. In a last-ditch effort, Ceausescu tried to address the nation once more, but was forced to take cover as projectiles were hurled at him by the furious crowd. Eventually, Ceausescu and his wife managed to escape from the roof of the Central Committee building via helicopter, marking the beginning of the end for his regime. The period of protests in December 1989 against Nicolae Ceaușescu's regime resulted in a tragic death toll, with estimates suggesting over 1,000 people lost their lives, many at the hands of the secret police attempting to suppress the uprising. After attempting to escape via helicopter, Ceausescu and his wife were eventually intercepted by the army near Târgoviște due to entering restricted airspace. They were briefly held by the police before being handed over to the military. On Christmas Day 1989, Ceausescu stood trial in front of a military tribunal, facing charges including genocide and illegal accumulation of wealth. He was swiftly convicted and sentenced to death by firing squad. Ceausescu's final request to die alongside his wife was granted, and they were executed together, their hands tied behind their backs against the wall. The execution was recorded and broadcast on Romanian television, symbolizing the end of Ceausescu's regime and the victory of the protesters. Initially buried in unmarked graves, subsequent DNA testing confirmed their identities. Ceausescu's family later arranged a formal burial at Ghencea Cemetery. Nicolae Ceaușescu is remembered as a staunch communist leader who imposed severe hardships on his people to pursue his ambitions. His brutal regime and dramatic downfall remain powerful symbols associated with the collapse of communism in Europe, immortalized in the footage of his final moments and speeches. Well, that's it for today. What are your thoughts on Ceausescu's legacy? Do you think his downfall was inevitable, given the historical context of Eastern Europe in the late 1980s? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more engaging content from World History Explored. Until next time, take care and keep learning.